Hello and welcome back to Toy Thursday with Johnny Tiger on December 15, 2021. If you're wondering, why is it that we are just looking at an old guy who's dressed in a purple Chinese outfit, kneeling on the ground, looking like he's praying to God? Well, because this is not just any ordinary old guy, this is a grandpa that throws down. And oh, how he throws down. Of our various grandpa characters that we'll be showing, this is perhaps one of the more impressive and close to my heart because, well, he is Chinese, so there's that. But there's a lot more reasons. This character and I do have a bit of a history with each other. So grab a chair, sit down, pour yourself a drink, and let us dive into the background of the master of Ansatsuken, or the master of many different fighting forms. His name is Gan. Who is Gan? Well, Gan was one of the best, the world's best underground assassin in the Chinese mafia. He hails from the Street Fighter series of video game, and he's actually one of the oldest Street Fighter characters, both in age and in the day he debuted. He first appeared in the original Street Fighter video game that came out in 1987. He was in the second stage when the stage was the fight took place in the People's Republic of China. Gan was a Chinese representative for that fight. Later, he again appeared in the 1996 Street Fighter Alpha 2, and then in 1998 Street Fighter Alpha 3, uh, and finally got his due in action figure form in the early 2000s. I believe this was 2003, made by the unfortunately now uh, bankrupted toy company SOTA. That's SOTA, SOTA, who made some of the best Street Fighter action figures ever made to this date. So it's too bad that they're not making them anymore, but I am very glad that they did get around to make an action figure of this one of the most badass, most hardcore old geezers in the video game world. So why do I say that I have some history with this particular character? Why does he impress me so much beyond the fact that he was the representative for China during the Street Fighter video game? Well, this character brings me back to the good old memory of playing Street Fighter Alpha 2 with my brothers in the mid 90s. So that's one big plus right here. Uh, as soon as I think of Gang, the character, I can clearly remember his background music, his moveset, his vocalization, his how to play him, and that just brings me back so much memory. And I remember even back when he first was introduced to me in the Street Fighter Alpha 2 video game, I was very intrigued because here is this old Chinese guy who looks like any other character can just break him in half. I mean, if you have seen or played Street Fighter, you know what I'm talking about. Every other character in the game is big or tall and full of muscles and got like the size of tree trunks and bicep, the size of footballs. But here is this old guy. I mean, look at him. He's just like normal looking guy. Well, I mean, he's like normal proportion. There's no musculature. There's no giant biceps or whatever. This is the old guy. This is the old Chinese guy. His official stats put him at 5'10" and 130 pounds. Uh, well, when he was younger, he was 150 pounds, but when he got older, he's down to 130 pounds. This is an old, skinny, very small Chinese character who managed to be extremely deadly in the video game. Like I mentioned, Gan was one of the best assassins in the Chinese mafia, and he is the master of both the Crane style Kung Fu and Praying Mantis style Kung Fu. Gan was also the only character in the entire Street Fighter lineup that can change his fighting style during his fight. All the other characters, what you see is what you get. But Gang was the only character that able to change his to a completely different fighting style whenever you want him to. Those of you that know me really well and have been paying attention to my survival and tactical videos know that I've also, in the past, dabbled in praying mantis and white crane style kung fu. So this was a character that I could instantly identify with, and because I knew approximately what he was going to move, how he was going to move, I could use him to my advantage rather than like many other unbelievable characters in Street Fighter, guys that throw fireballs and lightning and hurricanes and generate tornadoes with their kicks. This guy was more realistic, more genuine in his movement, like a real martial artist would be. So that I definitely could identify with. On top of all that, Gan's character also draw heavily uh, on a real, well, I shouldn't say real, Chinese folk hero that is quite legendary. The guy who was the head of the White Lotus Society uh, by the name of Pai Mei, means the guy with white brow. Pai Mei is so legendary that he's often said to be one of the most fiercest, one of the best martial art masters in modern Chinese history. So that's the guy that this character was depicting or a parody of. So even the guy that he drew inspiration from was an old, really badass person. After he retired from being an assassin, Gan continued on to do some very impressive things. For example, in Street Fighter Alpha 2, which was released in 1996, he was roughly 70 years old. By this time, he's retired and he has trained a very good martial artist who was the father of Chun Li. Chun Li, I mean, anyone who knows Street Fighter, I don't even need to explain who Chun Li uh, is. But so for those of you who don't know, Chun Li is basically a heroine, a female main character of Street Fighter. She's an Interpol agent, the strongest woman in the world, one of the greatest martial artists, and so on and so on. She's one of the good guys. So Chun Li's father, who was also very good, uh, was trained by Gan, and then Gan also helped raise the martial art twin Yin and Yang, who appeared later in the Street Fighter video game. When Chun Li started to investigate the evil Shadowloo organization, the crime lord Master Bison, it was Gan who helped her in Hong Kong, evading some of the traps and deathfalls set up by the bad guys, and Gan also helped her in many of the fights when she was ambushed by the evildoers. Now, all this wouldn't really have been exceptionally impressive. I mean, Gen was one of the best assassins around. So yeah, it makes sense that he can train someone really good and he can take part in beating up some gangsters and stuff like that. What makes Gan one of the most impressive characters on the Street Fighter roster is that he fought one of the, well, never mind one of the, he fought the strongest character in the entire Street Fighter universe. Not just once, but twice. And as far as we know, both times he and the opponent, they couldn't come to a conclusion on who won the fight. This guy I'm talking about, none other than Akuma, who we definitely will be including in the grandpa list as well. So keep tuned. Akuma will be coming up pretty soon. Maybe not the next episode, but the episode after the next one. So Akuma, again, if you know Street Fighter, I don't need to explain who Akuma is. For those who don't know, because I'm going to introduce him later, I don't want to go into too much detail, but suffice to say, Akuma is not even like a martial artist. Like the rest of the Street Fighter characters are martial artists. Akuma is like a god. He's like a demon. He's so over the top. His martial art is so over the top. He can destroy an entire island. Destroy an entire island with one single punch. That's how strong Akuma is. Like pretty much the ultimate uh, character in Street Fighter. He is uh, undefeated and all that. And uh, so this 70-year-old guy, Gan, went out of his way to track down Akuma to challenge him to a fight because he believed that Akuma was going to be a worthy opponent. And they fought and they used their deadliest technique on each other, and both of them survived. Now, surviving Gan's deadliest technique might have been very impressive, but for those of us, well, we don't really know just how deadly was he. So that wouldn't be saying a lot. But for him, who is 70 years old, to have survived the deadliest technique of the guy who can destroy an island with a single punch, that really is something. Okay. And then afterward, Akuma was going to continue to fight him, but then Akuma realized that Gan has leukemia, that Gan was terminally ill. So Akuma walked away from the fight. Uh, so the fight had no conclusion. Akuma refused to fight someone who was not at their best. And Gan, being terminally ill at the time and 70 years old, definitely wasn't at his best. But again, we need to repeat this. This is a guy who's set in his 70s, who is not muscular, not big, who is quite small actually, and who's got leukemia, and he tanked Akuma's ultimate killing technique. And just to show how badass he is, a few years later, Gan again looked for Akuma and found him and challenged him to a second fight. And again, he managed to walk away from this second fight. I mean, if that is not impressive, I don't know what is. I mean, of the entire Street Fighter Pantheon, the entire Street Fighter roster, the only person that can fight Akuma that often and survive is the main hero Ryu. And because he's a main hero, there's a bit of a plot armor there. The main hero cannot die. Ryu is supposed to be the best. So him surviving Akuma is, and Akuma never tried to kill Ryu in the first place because he always saw Ryu as his disciple, his successor. So every time he fight Ryu, he's more like testing him. Now Gan is a different guy, a different story. Akuma had no reason to hold back when he attacked Gan in a fight. So this is an old guy who honestly tanked Akuma in a fight. That is downright amazing, impressive, awesome. That's everything we want to see in a grandpa that can throw down. Now that we have established beyond shadow of a doubt why Gan belong on this list of grandpas that can throw down, let's look at the action figure itself because it is very, very impressive, just like the old guy himself. This action figure was made, like I said, by SOTA in I think 2003, 2004. He stands just shy of 6 inches tall, and he is depicted in just like how Gan is usually depicted in the anime, in the comic books, and in Street Fighter Alpha. He has white hair, white, really long white beard. His face is all wrinkly like a prune, and he's wearing a very striking looking purple Chinese kung fu style robe that have flaps at the front and back that go down to almost his shin. It's a very flowing, very wide robe with a bellowing sleeve that his hand come out of. On his waist, he wears a red sash, and on his feet, he wears red shoes with white socks. What's really impressive about this figure, so I was told, is the different shading used on his hair and beard. His fingernails have a different shade on them, and his pants have a different shade of purple as comparing to the top of his robe. So there's a lot of very, very great paint work going to this action figure. Now, obviously, great paint work wouldn't really impress me, and honestly, the general design of the character doesn't really lend itself to any kind of excitement. He's an old guy in a loose Chinese martial art robe. That's it. Um, but this action figure is very well articulated. I mean, anyone who can see the screen, you've probably been seeing how he's able to pull off all kinds of martial art poses. I've been changing his poses from the beginning of the video randomly, and so yeah, he had double jointed elbow, double jointed knee, his head, shoulder, bicep, wrist, and ankles, waist, and chest, everything is articulated. He's not one of the most articulated action figure by a long shot, but for the most part, anything that you want him to do to approximate what he can do in the video game, you shouldn't have any problem with this guy. That's how good he is. Um, in some poses, he is a little bit hard to balance or stand because of some of the flaws on this action figure, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The flaps of his robe is soft rubber, and they do go down to quite close to the ground. So if you get him in deep enough crouch, the bottom of the robe will help you balance him. But you do have to be careful. In warm weather, the flap of the robe will warp because of the higher temperature if you use them to hold him up or to balance him. In addition to an impressive paint scheme and very, very impressive articulation, this action figure also comes with quite a good deal of accessories or spare body parts because Gan doesn't really use any weapon or wear any armor. So the only thing that you can give him is a spare body parts. And again, if you've been looking at the screen since the beginning of the video, you will notice that he has changed his look a few times. He comes with three separate pairs of hands, two in open palm strike pose and two with closed fist, and two, the one that you see on screen now, the finger strike with a praying mantis style kung fu finger strike. He also comes with two heads. Both basically look the same, but one is his normal stern, serious visage, and the other one, he has one eyebrow raised, like he's sneering, like, "Oh, are you done already? You can't even beat an old guy." That kind of expression. So with two portraits and six hands, three pairs of hands, he definitely is quite uh, loaded with accessories. Now, of course, he is a lot smaller than most of the other figures in the Street Fighter lineup, so he still feels a little bit pricey. You are paying normal price for a figure that is smaller and doesn't really come with any more than other characters. Uh, a lot less in some cases. With all that said, like many great action figures, Gan has no shortage of his own flaws as well. And these flaws are quite significant. They do tend to make this action figure a little bit tiresome to display. Uh, you guys wouldn't be able to tell because I'm able to pause the video and rearrange him, but during the making of this particular episode, I probably clocked in over half an hour trying to get him posed. This is a very, very, very annoying character action figure to pose because he does not have a display stand. He does not have the function to stand on the display base. His feet are super, super tiny. Uh, it's quite weird because when you look at the rest of the Street Fighter guys, the rest of them have gigantic feet. But Gan here, tiny little Chinese sized feet. And he just has such a hard time standing because of those tiny little feet. Now, tiny feet would have been okay, but he's also plagued with very loose joints on his ankles and on his hips. The ankle joints are a little bit easier to deal with, but loose hips in an action figure is just really, really bad. Uh, his hips are so loose that if I take his head and pick him up and just gently shake him, his legs would whip back and forth like he's like hanging on loose string or something. So yeah, those super loose joints on the hips are very detrimental to posing this action figure. This is why when I pose him on the display, a lot of times he is crouching or kneeling. You have to get him to stand. It's nearly impossible, and get him to stand for any length of time. Yes, yeah, pretty much impossible. Despite his rather obvious flaws, Jan turned out to be a very, very worthy action figure in a very worthy line of really good action figures made by a very impressive company in the early 2000s. On top of that, he is the action figure portraying one of the most hardcore, badass, impressive old fighters in the Street Fighter universe, which it's a huge series of video games, and Street Fighter has no shortage of amazing, crazily impressive people. But again, it's up there among the best of them. One of the very, very few people who went out of his way to challenge Akuma and survived both times and even earned Akuma's respect. So Because of all those reasons, he definitely deserves to be on our list of grandpas that throw down. Keep tuned for next Toy Thursday, which will take a break from this Grandpa series and showcase a couple of more Christmas related uh, action figures. For now, have a good night. We'll be back again tomorrow for Fitness Friday.